Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsome with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Now at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown. They are throwing this lane for the left hand. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Come on, guys. Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. Coming at you on a Monday night here. It's a little bit of downtime in between the start of the NCAA tournament and the conference tournaments. And so thought this would be the perfect time to sneak in a podcast here for you guys on the football side of things. Of course, we do have some news in terms of the current team. We do know the start dates for the upcoming spring practice for the Tar Heels for this year. So we will give you the start date for that. And then we do have the pro day date that has been made at least known to the media as of earlier this week. And so we'll give you all that information at the end of this podcast. But tonight is one of our more anticipated podcasts of the season that we typically do. Each year we hand out our most wanted prospects for the whatever class. This year it is the 2027 class. And so we're going through and giving you the 20 guys that we want the most here in the 2027 class. These are just my opinion this year. You know, in the past we have had some other opinions that have been in there, but it's just me this year giving you my opinion on who exactly I want. So we'll go through all 20 of the guys that I have on my list, tell you about some of the toughest guys to ultimately leave off the list as well. Certainly a lot of different guys that I really liked breaking down here as I went through, watched all of their film, and made the decision on whether or not they were inside of the top 20. Now, in terms of how this list is put together, as I said, I did go back, watch the film of all these guys. But, you know, the other thing that you got to factor in is position of need in terms of the Tar Heels. And so there are certain positions that Carolina is pretty strong at. In terms of what you need every single year, we also take that into account. There are certain positions, especially like the quarterback position, that you need one every year. Now, I know that a lot of people look at the quarterback room and say, well, it's pretty loaded right now, but you need to bring in a quarterback every single year to make sure that you have the depth in that room and to make sure that you have the competition that you need in that room. So just letting you know, there will be a quarterback on this list. I only put one on the list for this year, but certainly some other guys that were really tough to leave off at the quarterback spot. And that's one of the positions that I probably have a couple of guys that were the hardest to leave off. Those are some of the guys we'll talk about here before we get into the actual top 20 list that we narrow down. I mean, there were, a couple of guys, especially when we're talking about the quarterbacks, I think names that are worth keeping an eye on if you're a Tar Heel fan one of their more recent offers, Dramail Crothers out of Owensboro Catholic High School in Owensboro, Kentucky. Certainly a guy that's getting a lot of pub right now, getting a lot of hype here as he goes and gets prepared for his senior year there. He is certainly someone that Carolina just recently jumped in on that could become a name that is worth noting over the next couple of weeks. Champ Smith, another quarterback out of Cocoa High School in Miami, Florida. This is one that Carolina's been on for a little bit right now. But, certainly a name that, when I went back, watched his film, really impressed with some of the things that he brought to the table, but just not enough to make it onto this list. Will Wood, another quarterback out of Natick, Massachusetts at Xaverian Brothers High School up there. He just lost one of his top receivers, unfortunately, to one of the bigger schools in the state. And so it'll be interesting to see how he plays his senior year. But those are three names that were really tough to leave off from a Carolina perspective. In terms of the running backs, Justice Hardy, definitely a name that Carolina fans should know, out of Wilson High School in Reading, Pennsylvania. Really talented player that I really liked when I went through and watched him. And then Mason Ball, the running back out of Jacksonville High School in Jacksonville, Arkansas, another guy that I really liked. Certain elements of his game I think really stood out, especially the speed and burst that he had, but had to leave him off of this list. And that tells you what type of list we've got here for you guys. And again, one other thing that I want to stress is that a lot of these guys are guys that maybe, Carolina has been tied to in terms of their recruitment. Carolina has hosted them for a visit somewhere along the way, something like that. It's not just going to be all 5 stars. There's only one 5-star that actually ends up making the list, but it's ones that are a little more sourced, a little more intel. So there's a realistic chance of some of these actually happening. And, the other thing that I really put a focus on are the in-state prospects. For me, that's always one of the most important things for Carolina to take care of, are the guys closest to home. So that can involve in-state guys from the state of North Carolina, but can also involve guys out of the state of South Carolina. There will be a couple of guys on the list from that state as well that I think are going to be very important for Carolina. But getting back to some of the other guys that were the toughest to leave off the list, Anthony Roberts, the wide receiver from Rolesville High School in Rolesville, North Carolina. Really like some of the things that he was able to do, especially winning downfield, but just couldn't put him on this list. Wide receiver, not going to be a huge need for Carolina in this upcoming class, considering what they have done in years past and the group that they would be able to bring back going into the 2027 season. Also, another recent addition in terms of offers for Carolina, Namaje Thompson out of Crest High School up there in Shelby, North Carolina, is definitely another name that I think is worth keeping an eye on here as we go throughout the next few months. Tight end Mason Oglesby out of New Palestine High School in New Palestine, Indiana. Very athletic player, really solid route tree. Certainly a guy that he's getting later in his recruitment process. Carolina part of his top 6. Don't know how serious of a contender Carolina ultimately is for that one in terms of landing the commitment. When you make the top 6, clearly you're doing something right. But I don't know if they're going to necessarily end up landing his commitment when it's all said and done. You go to the offensive lineman in this class, Kelsey Adams out of Langston Hughes High School in Atlanta, Georgia. Definitely a guy that's a run game specialist, really shines in that area, very physical at the point of attack, but just didn't make the list for me. Also, Patrick O'Brien out of Archbishop Malheur High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Very good high school. A guy that was a pretty good pass protector based off of what I saw on film. Strong footwork and uses his length very well, but ultimately just not enough to make it on to this list ahead of some of the other guys that we have. Another recent offer for Carolina that's worth keeping an eye on. Going to be interested to see how he grows this year at his new school. Not saying he was bad coming from his old high school, but Moreno Fisher, the offensive tackle who's currently unranked at a Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. Now he's going to be amongst the best in the state, a team that just won the state title, as opposed to where he was with Independence, which was a very solid high school, a contender to win the state title. But Huff starting to become a little more of a factory. It's been one for a while, but it's starting to become even more of one in the Charlotte area. And so I'm really interested to see what he looks like when he gets there in that offense that's going to be a little bit more modernized. There could be, especially, Ethan Royal at quarterback. You wonder if they give him a little more responsibility this year. So could be another guy that's worth keeping an eye on. Another one that I will point out is his teammate, Nori White, who is also a transfer from the same high school, Independence High School, but he's going to Huff. That's another guy that I think you need to keep an eye on if you're a Carolina fan. He already scheduled an official visit. That news was dropped earlier today, or I think it was last night, from Inside Carolina, that he is going to be taking an official visit to Chapel Hill. It'll be sometime during the month of June, so make sure that you guys keep an eye out for when that date is officially released. We'll let you know as we go throughout the offseason more of these schedules that are going to be coming up for official visits and some of the spring visits that are going to be on hand from a Carolina perspective. A couple other guys that are worth noting here along the offensive line: Jacob Burns out of Rabun Gap, Nakuchi High School in Kingston, or in Rabun Gap, Georgia. Now, the thing is that he is originally from Kingston, Ontario. So that's a school where you go there, you go to play football, you stay on campus, everything like that. Burns is a tremendous player, probably the hardest player to leave off of this list. It's either him or another linebacker that I'll tell you about here coming up, in Jake Godfrey. Those two guys, almost impossible to leave them off the list, but just had to squeeze them out. If we would have gone to a 25 prospect group, then they definitely would have been a part of it, because he's an incredibly versatile player who can play either tackle or guard, athletic player that succeeds in screen scenarios, stronger body, which allows him to pile up pancake blocks, and good footwork and promising lateral movement that could keep him at tackle. Definitely like everything that I see about Jacob Burns. Hopefully that's one that Carolina has high on their list. And then another guy that Carolina is currently in the running for, I know he's going to be on campus sometime during the spring. That would be 3-star interior offensive lineman Dejon Yarborough out of Basha High School in Chandler, Arizona. Absolute mauler who has heavy hands, good footwork. Really like everything that I see about him. But again, another guy that just misses out on making it onto this list. You go to the defensive side of the football, there's some really good players. 4-star edge rusher Jaden Brody out of Rollsville High School in Rollsville, North Carolina. Really liked his burst off the line of scrimmage, plays with the physicality when needed. It doesn't show up the entire time, but certainly when he needs to, he will turn it on. Sheds blocks due to pure effort, and really high motor are things that you like about him. Just not enough to make it onto this list. That's how tough this list ultimately is. Some of the defensive linemen that were tough to leave off: Caden Robinson Vickers, another name that Carolina fans should definitely take notice of. I believe he has an official visit scheduled to Carolina at this point, but that is not 100% confirmed. He is from Dunlin High School in Dunlin, Florida. Great use of technical pass rush moves to shed blocks. Nice release off the line of scrimmage. Uses the physicality when he needs to shed blocks, and promising pass rusher from a defensive tackle standpoint. So really like everything about him. Xavier Perkins out of Jordan High School in Durham, North Carolina. A guy that, plays a little bit on the edge. Utilizes his pass rush moves when needed, hits hard at the point of attack, and has some nice bend off the edge at times, which is, ultimately what allows him to turn that corner quickly and get to the quarterback. This is another guy that I think just misses out. So certainly someone that is worth noting if you're a Carolina fan. There's really, three linebackers that I really love. Jake Godfrey out of North Gwinnett High School in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Sideline to sideline speed, covers the very well. Strong closing speed and is outstanding in blitz situations. So certainly something that Carolina would love to see. Trip Keller at a Jesuit high school in Tampa, Florida. This is one to definitely know if you are a Tar Heel fan. Strong coverage ability if he is going to transition to linebacker full-time. Aggressive player who hits hard, makes plays in coverage because of his ability to break on the football, and thrives when he's playing closer to the line of scrimmage. That is certainly someone that fits the bill of a linebacker, but played a decent amount of safety this past year. It'll be interesting to see ultimately what they end up doing with him this year if he transitions more into a linebacker role, because that's, I think, what Carolina is ultimately wanting him to play. And then Jackson Ross at a Hammond High School Hammond School in Columbia, South Carolina. Hard hitter that makes ball carriers pay often. Downhill linebacker. We've seen that, quite a few times over the last few years that Carolina goes after guys like that, especially if they're going to be playing that middle linebacker spot. The good thing about him is he shows some promise in coverage as well. So certainly a name that is worth noting out of the state of South Carolina. Another guy that was probably right there that would have made it inside a top 25, A.K. Crummell out of Clayton High School in Knightdale, North Carolina. Of course, we had his head coach on talking about Drake May back before the Super Bowl, and Scott Chadwick. He's done an amazing job with him. And this is, a guy that thrives in man coverage situations. I think the reason ultimately that I left him off the list is really the only reps that you see him take is him in man coverage. Carolina's going to want guys that can certainly hold their own in zone coverage as well, but he's got a nose for the football, which shows up in terms of interceptions and forced fumbles. Really good speed that allows him to break on the football well, and also plays physical to fight through blocks in the run game. So really liked him. Certainly a guy that I think deserves to be on your mind if you're a Tar Heel fan as we go throughout the recruiting process here in the 2027 class. Royalton Allen, another name that Carolina fans should become familiar with. He scheduled an official visit to campus. That was, I think, late last week, maybe the week before that. He comes from Oak Hills High School in Hesperia, California. Another guy that, I really liked, very versatile player, can play corner and safety. Just missed out on my list. And then you go to some of the other names that I think are worth noting here. Jalen Welch out of Grayson High School in Loganville, Georgia. Really fits best, I think, as a coverage safety because he's listed as an athlete. Does a good job of watching the quarterback's eyes. Solid tackler and good at breaking hard on the football to make plays on it. Also, Amir McBride, out of Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School in Baltimore, Maryland. Really good wide receiver. I think he's a tremendous route runner, a guy that consistently wins downfield, good speed and burst that makes him dangerous after the catch. So those guys right there that I just listed off to you guys are the ones that we don't even necessarily have on the list. But then you get to the guys that we do. So at number 20 on the list for Carolina, I have Jeremiah Dent, the 3-star running back out of Marion High School in Marion, Arkansas. He is one of the guys that I think, in terms of a loaded group of running backs, Carolina should be focused on. When I went through and watched him, I think, the one thing that really stands out first and foremost as a ball carrier is how decisive he is. Something that should pair nicely with the young backs that Carolina has coming back. You would expect into that 2027 season, who also run the same way. He combines really good speed and acceleration with an edge that allows him to run through defenders at times on film, making him the most complete back that the team is targeting. So that's one of the things. You love the speed that he brings to the table, but you also love the physical edge. When you have a guy like that can combine both of those, that certainly makes him stick out. That is even more so the case when you consider what he does as a receiver out of the backfield, in terms of him being the most complete back that Carolina has offered in this class. He's one of a couple of guys that we'll see and talk about. I believe Aiden Gibson, who we'll talk about later on this list, also another guy that's split out wide at times in order to affect the receiving game. And so you're talking about guys that not only are they lining up in the slot to get open, these are guys that are lining up all the way on the outside and winning on the outside in terms of the routes they're running to catch the football as running backs. That is pretty impressive. Jeremiah Dent, a guy that does have an official visit scheduled, and they definitely need to keep the heat on, because this is going to be one of the guys that is going to be recruited heavily. Of course, when you look at his recruitment, you know that the in-state Arkansas Razorbacks are certainly going to be in the running for him. So that's one that Carolina has to be wary of. And, this is just one where, Carolina's already got an official visit scheduled with him. So it's about making sure that they get to that official visit, they get him on campus, and then you just go from there. But I think early on, you like where Carolina is in this recruitment. And this looks like a guy that could potentially be the next great running back for the Tar Heels in the backfield. Really like what he does. But yeah, in-state Arkansas going to be the biggest obstacle for Carolina to overcome. You move on to number 19 on the list. Carolina, definitely one of the areas of need for Carolina moving forward is going to be the edge rusher room, because they do lose two guys after this season. They are going to lose both Milcart Abujide and Donovan Hoylet, who Carolina welcomed in from the transfer portal out of Richmond. Both of those guys are going to be seniors this year, and so they are going to be done after the season is over. And so you need to get some guys in here that have a little bit of talent right off the bat. One guy that I picked out is a guy who's listed as a linebacker, unranked in the 2027 class, according to Rivals. That would be Jason Crenshaw Jr. out of Prattville High School in Prattville, Alabama. He is a guy that, might be listed as a linebacker, but I think really is set to have success at the college level as an edge rusher. Really nice release off the line of scrimmage, and combines it with really strong overall speed that makes him tough to stay in front of, especially for slower tackles. So one of the things that you really like when you have a guy that has a quick release off the line of scrimmage, it puts him in an advantageous situation right out of the gate. It makes it really difficult for some of those slower tackles to be able to either stay in front of him, allowing him to cross their face, or he might be able to beat them around the outside with speed. The thing that I like about him the most, though, is I think he has great bend, which is something that's very important. We talk about leverage a lot when you talk about offensive and defensive line play. This is a guy that plays with the right pad level because of how low he can get when he turns that corner, when he bends that corner. And that also allows you to take shorter angles to the quarterback and succeed at getting him on the ground. And so I think that's what you see with Crenshaw. He definitely is a guy that lives in the opposing backfield. I think he's certainly someone that Carolina fans should be really excited about. The Tar Heels do already have an official visit scheduled with him for this summer, and this is one that they have to keep pushing in, because he is going to be someone that I think once they get eyes on him over there at Prattville High School, where there are a few other big name targets, there are going to be a lot of people that will be coming after him. As of right now, it's still pretty early in his recruiting process. Carolina is the team with the early lead, but Kentucky is a team that does have an offer on the table for him as well. And so I definitely think that if you're Carolina, getting ready. You'll be hosting him on June 5th through the 7th. That'll be the weekend that he'll be in town officially for Carolina. This is one of those guys that you would like to get wrapped up as soon as you can get him on campus, because he is exactly what you're looking for in terms of an edge rusher. A little thinner, certainly not a thicker edge rusher like some of the other guys that you could possibly have in this class, but definitely a guy that I think can be very, very effective for Carolina if they do end up bringing him in. You move on to number 18 on the list. That would be Lance Henderson, the 3-star safety out of Southern High School in Durham, North Carolina. This is another guy that the Tar Heels at the safety position. There are a lot of guys ahead of him on this list, but this is another guy that Carolina should hold in pretty high regard. It's the first in-state prospect that officially makes the list here, but won't be the last, that's for sure. He is certainly a guy that has the versatility that you want. We talk about this a lot when it comes to the defensive backs. You want to see guys that bring a lot of versatility to the table. I think he certainly does. You look at him as a safety, certainly someone that thrives in that area, nickel corner, or potentially even a linebacker, which I think is ultimately what makes him such an intriguing prospect, is that you can play him all over the place. These guys are always going to be more valuable because if they don't succeed at one position, you can always throw them out there at another position. The reason why he could fit at safety or linebacker is he's a huge hitter that makes people pay in the middle of the field, and he loves to play downhill. He loves playing in the run game, getting into that backfield and making plays. That's certainly something that I think you're looking for out of a box safety or out of a linebacker position. I think if he's going to play linebacker, certainly going to have to put on a little bit more weight, so maybe that's not ultimately where he needs to be, but I think he could be one of those guys that thrives as an in-the-box safety, and that's definitely something that Carolina should be strongly considering if they are looking to bring him ultimately in. I think he should be very high on that list because of what he brings in the run game and what he brings versatility-wise. Has really good closing speed. Definitely a guy that makes plays on the football and creates turnovers at a pretty high level. That's something that Carolina's been looking to do for a long, long time, and it really hasn't manufactured itself. Not under Mac Brown, not under Bill Belichick in their first season. They need to be able to create more turnovers, especially if you're going to be a unit that gives up yards. And so Lance Henderson, certainly a guy that's able to do that. He also brings some really nice special teams ability to the table, which is something that should allow him to get on the field early at the college level. This is one of those recruitments that I think Carolina's got to take seriously. As an in-state prospect, I think this is one that Carolina should be all over. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily in the greatest spot as of right now. That would go to NC State, Duke, Virginia Tech, and Rutgers. Those are the teams that look to be off to the best start, but it's still early. Can Carolina get themselves an official visit somewhere along the way? I think that's something that they should be looking to do as we get closer and closer to the month of June, because this dude just has a little too much talent to bypass. Look, 5'11", 180. As I said, if he's going to be a linebacker, he's going to have to put on more weight, but certainly a prospect that I love, even though the measurables might not be as great as some of the other guys that you could possibly bring in the class. I think as an in-state prospect, he is someone who should be valued with the skill set that he has. You move on to unranked tight end Carter Blackwell out of Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. Definitely a guy that I think it really is at a position that Carolina won't really need anybody in this upcoming class. But again, you always want to take at least one on the recruiting trail. And so I think this is going to be important for Carolina, and he would be the tight end that I have on the list. I did not put anybody else on there. I know there's a really talented 4-star in Jackson Dollar, who's an in-state prospect. Carolina looks like they're pretty much out on that one. And so I went with Carter Blackwell, a guy who's a little under the radar at this point. And I think, look, he might be unranked now, but he shouldn't be for long with how hard and crisp he runs the routes that he's given. And, that's the thing that you really ultimately want to see, especially out of, guys that are going to thrive in that area. He's a guy that, look, he has the ability to block. He's a pretty complete player, but I think where he's ultimately going to make most of his hay is going to be as a receiver. And so when you have guys like that, you want to see guys that can carve up some of these defenses, even at the tight end position. You want to see him have a little bit of wiggle to him. And that's exactly what he does. He's a guy that's able to challenge down the seam. That's certainly something that Carolina will really like. You always want guys that can really challenge the middle of that defense. And it's been a while since we felt like Carolina has had someone consistent like that. We definitely didn't have it this past year. I think that's certainly something that Carolina fans definitely want. That's one thing that I think Carolina, since Eric Ebron, really it's been hit and miss. You haven't found any guys that have been overly successful in that area. There were some guys that you really liked in terms of John Copenhaver. That was certainly someone that I think we thought we had high prospects for and really thought was going to turn into one of those types of players, but it never really materialized. Same thing with a guy like Kamori Morales. That was a guy that you really felt like the closest thing you've got is Bryson Nesbitt. And maybe that's what ultimately a guy like Carter Blackwell can become. I think there's potential for him to even be a little bit of a better blocker if you're Carolina. As a blocker, saw some promise. There is, the physicality that he brings to his run blocking. And I think that's certainly something that you like to see, because that's not something that you can teach. You either have it or you don't. And so I think, everything that you see from him is catch radius, one of the better ones of the tight ends in the class. You can throw it up to him and he's going to come down with the football, and he has reliable hands based off of what we've seen on film. And so it really looks like a guy that, we should be talking about a little bit more here. I expect that as his recruitment goes along, you'll start to see more and more conversations about him, especially in the state of Georgia. That's why Carolina, I think, has to jump in early on this one. And if they do, then they're going to have a chance to capitalize because, right now it's Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, it's Jacksonville State as some of those teams that are maybe off to the best start with him. It really did the most recent offers that he's had are starting to be some of the bigger schools where you've seen Louisville, you've seen NC State, Carolina jump in there. And so this is an opportunity for Carolina, I think, to jump out early, establish themselves as one of the contenders in this race, and hopefully eventually land his commitment when it's all said and done. You move on to number 16 on the list. That would be Jackson Roper from Cherry Creek High School in Englewood, Colorado. So again, even though I do like some of the out-of-state guys or some of the in-state guys, some of the out-of-state guys that are a little bit closer to home, this is, definitely someone that I would love for Carolina to bring in, coming from the middle of the country. Roper, another definitely an interior offensive lineman that, Carolina should be valuing. That's a spot where Carolina, I think, has to hit the high school recruiting trail very hard, because, yes, they are going to need to hit the transfer portal hard after the season is over. Once again, doesn't matter how many guys ultimately leave. This offensive line this year, probably the scariest part of this team heading into the season. We thought last year's offensive line was pretty bad. This year's probably going to be even worse. And so we're going to have to see what Carolina's approach is. I think part of it should be that high school recruiting ranks, going out, getting guys that could eventually turn into something down the line, mainly because I don't know what the coaching situation is ultimately going to be after this season. So hopefully they are prioritizing the interior offensive line and even at the tackle spots in this high school recruiting cycle, because I think it's going to be important to recruit some young guys there to go along with some of the veterans that they're going to have. Roper, absolute mauler in the run game that piles up pancake blocks, and certainly someone that you love the pad level that he plays with off the line of scrimmage. Keeps it low, really drives guys out of the way, and so definitely a guy that I think Carolina would welcome in a Tar Heel uniform. Does a good job in certain circumstances of climbing to the second level. Very important, because you want to be able to get a hat on someone in the second layer of the defense, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a safety, whatever it is. That's what turns short gains into some of those chunk yardage plays that you're ultimately looking for as an offense. He's also a good pass protector. Looks good in that area, and has some good footwork and lateral movement, and can really shine if he kicks inside to guard. I think it's good enough. It's serviceable enough for him at the high school level to be able to succeed at tackle. But I think ultimately you want him inside at guard, especially with how physical he is in the run game, how low he keeps his pad level. I think he's going to be a guy that can really clear some of those defensive tackles out of the way when he gets to this level. Definitely a guy that I think Carolina has expressed some interest in early on. He has expressed the interest back. And so Carolina, I think, again, it's going to be very difficult because he is a guy that is out of state. But if Carolina does what they need to do and positions themselves early, they could be a team that factors in. Now, his offer sheet is a little bit stiffer than some of the other guys that we have talked about. Texas A&M right now is one that is listed as the favorite according to Rivals. You also have Oregon, Ohio State, USC, Colorado. So a lot of big-time names that are in here and that many people believe will be a factor in his recruitment. But it's not nothing that Carolina is apparently at least standing out a little bit to him. He hasn't scheduled an official visit, where he has official visits scheduled to Colorado, USC, A&M, Ohio State, and Oregon. So Carolina's got to get on that visit schedule, but certainly off to a solid start with a guy out there in the state of Colorado. You move on to number 15. This is one of my favorite players on the offensive side of the ball. I just couldn't put him any higher because I don't think it's going to be a big need for Carolina in this class. I told you when we were going through the wide receivers, just don't think that it's going to be one of the main focuses for Carolina in this class. I think if they're going to go out and replace a guy like Jordan Shipp, if he ends up leaving early, they're probably going to go through the portal to be able to do that. And in terms of the guys that they brought in here in recent years through the high school ranks, I think they're going to roll with a lot of those guys. I don't see many of those guys potentially leaving in the offseason, so you won't have to hit this position nearly as hard. But I go with Malik Miller, the 3-star wide receiver out of Dutch Fork High School in Columbia, South Carolina. He's a guy that transferred there after spending the first 3 years of his high school career at Irmo High School. So now going to play for one of the state powers should help him in terms of his overall recruitment. This is, one of those guys that I think should be prioritized because he's very shifty pre and post catch, which makes it hard for defenders to contain him, especially when you combine it with the nice burst and acceleration that he brings to the table in both aspects. He is an incredibly strong route runner because of his shiftiness and does a great job of consistently creating separation. One of the most important things that you have to do as a wide receiver, you got to be able to get open. And Carolina's guys this past year just weren't able to do that, not at a high enough level. You didn't have the shifty sort of receivers, the guys that have the top end speed. And this is one of those guys that looks like he brings that to the table. One of the other things that sticks out about him is how well he catches the football with his hands, meaning that he probably is a pretty reliable receiver. When you are a guy that really uses your hands to bring the ball in, doesn't use your body, those are guys that really are trusted by quarterbacks, really are trusted by coaching staffs to be able to go out there and get the job done. Love everything about him. Think he's exactly what Carolina needs. And the good news is that his recruitment is still incredibly early. This is one that I think a lot of schools haven't yet jumped on because they haven't really gotten a look at him. Now, don't get it wrong. That's on them, because Irmo High School is not a small high school. They're not one that, is completely off the radar in the state of South Carolina. But I think when you look at it and you look at some of the top teams early on here, according to Rivals, Carolina's there, NC State's there, Wake's there, but there's also a school like Coastal. So this is one where it doesn't seem like South Carolina has gotten in on him early on. Now, that could, of course, change here, especially with Dutch Fork. That's definitely a high school that they have recruited very well. But, the hope is that Carolina can find a way to make some inroads here, get them on campus for an official visit, and really make this a competitive recruitment. Remember, Dutch Fork High School, that's where Julian Walker went to high school in the last class, and that's one that Carolina took all the way up until National Signing Day, where Carolina looked like they had a chance to potentially flip him. Love to see the same thing here in this recruitment from Malik Miller. Would love to see Carolina ultimately come out on top of them, but definitely want to see Carolina at least involved in this one, because I think he is that talented of a player. All right, number 14 on the list, Ramel Kuhn out of Brentwood Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's a 3-star prospect. Kuhn is another corner that the staff should be monitoring heavily in this class. He's a corner that thrived in both man and zone coverage, and a lot of that is because of the fluid hips that he brings to the table. Does a great job of flipping those hips and changing direction quickly, which allows him to, is a tough guy to shake for receivers. It allows him to stay with receivers very easily. That's what you're looking for, guys that can open their hips and really change direction, because you are going to have some of these technical route runners. How do you handle that kind of stuff as a corner? I really liked what I saw from Kuhn, and especially when you've got a guy that can play both man and zone coverage and succeed in both of those areas. I thought he did a really good job of that. He has good ball skills too, which I think allows him to play the football consistently in coverage and pile up pass deflections. Not a guy that's going to take away the football a ton in terms of interceptions, not going to blow you away with those numbers. But sometimes, those guys that can just create the pass deflections and ultimately lead to more incompletions, those are better than some of the guys that create a lot of interceptions on film. You always want those types of guys as well. But the thing to remember about some of those types of guys is that they can be very hit or miss. We've seen that in years past where Carolina's had those types of guys. Other teams around the country have had guys that come up with huge interception numbers, but ultimately give up a lot of yards on the other side of it. This is a guy that I think, because of how well he plays the ball, the fact that he can create a lot of pass deflections, he could be a guy that could really thrive playing on the outside. The other thing that you see from him, willing run defender, something that is always, always welcome when you talk about an outside corner. I think this is certainly one of the top corners that Carolina has on their board. Feels like Carolina off to a solid start with him based off of some of the intel that we had here over the last handful of months. But Carolina's got to stay on him, because this is another guy out of the state of Tennessee that the Volunteers could be in on heavily. I don't believe they have an offer to him at this point, but that is one where they could certainly jump in at any time. Georgia Tech, another school that is, relatively close in terms of, or at least closer than Carolina in terms of vicinity. They're off to a good start. Ole Miss, another team that's off to a good start for him. Oregon, Louisville, other teams that are in on him as well at this point. So for Carolina, I think, look, the fact that you've been mentioned as a team that's doing well with him, he's had some comments about what he's liked about Carolina is great. Now the next step is being able to get him on campus, being able to get him in for an official visit, and hopefully Carolina will be able to do that here at some point. You move on to number 13 on the list. That would be 3-star linebacker Michael Griffin out of Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. Griffin is an in-state prospect. And this is one of the rare things. This is very rare that I do this, but I think because of some of the intel that we've had recently coming out from inside Carolina on this front, it's worth putting him on the list. He's a guy that doesn't yet have an offer from Carolina, but is certainly someone that Carolina is monitoring. And I think they need to jump in on sooner rather than later. Incredible speed for a linebacker, which really jumps off the screen immediately when you watch his film because of how it allows him to shoot gaps and cover sideline to sideline. Those are, ultimate things that you're looking for out of linebackers. You got your downhill guys that are really going to be able to affect the run game, guys that are going to hit you hard in the hole, all those types of things. But you also need some guys that can really cover sideline to sideline, will be able to make tackles in space for Carolina. That's certainly something that you see when you watch Michael Griffin. His change of direction ability allows him to charge down plays that he shouldn't be able to after he initially drops. And while he is an aggressive player, he's a very smart one too that takes calculated angles to the football. That's one thing that you really love to see, are guys that are aggressive, but at the same time don't get out of position often. They're not going to be overly aggressive to where they overrun things. They're having to make shoestring tackles or potentially missing tackles. I saw him a lot during this season at West Charlotte. Really like what he brings to the table. I think he's a very sure-handed tackler, so I think this would be more than worth the investment for Carolina. And, the other thing that you really liked, I talked about it there, initially drops into coverage and then can react and somehow make plays on ball carriers. We've seen that if you go back and watch some of the best linebackers in the game, that's what they're able to do, where they initially react by dropping into coverage, realize what the play is, and they can close so quickly that they're able to make plays, even though they should. Most normal linebackers would have potentially taken themselves out of position. He has promising coverage skills, although they don't get featured much on his film, and he's someone who succeeds in getting pressure in blitz situations because of the speed and physical edge that he plays with. So they'll blitz him from time to time, and he is, really, just the guy that you wind up and he's going to find a way to get into the backfield. It really doesn't matter. He plays with that physical edge. Love the motor that he brings to the table. This is someone that Carolina's got to get on quickly because his recruitment is really taking off. I'm not sure how Carolina hasn't already offered him. I don't know what they're waiting on. One of the things that I saw when I watched him is he is a little bit smaller. So maybe that's one of the reasons at 5'10", 200 pounds where Carolina doesn't want to get in on him. To me, I think you bring him in, especially as an in-state guy and especially with the skill set that he brings to the table, and you add whatever weight you feel you have to add to his frame, because I think he can be very successful even if he does end up playing at that lighter weight. I know there have been some people that think that he could be a guy that could even play safety, especially if the coverage skills develop. So certainly someone that I think Carolina needs to jump on here quickly, because he, in one of the most recent articles that that was posted about him, he talked about how he's really high on schools like Florida State, Michigan, and Oklahoma. I know Notre Dame has jumped in on him. Oklahoma has offered him, as well as Auburn and Virginia Tech. Those are some of the schools that are in there right now. And so certainly someone that Carolina has to get working on, or else they're going to fall way behind and potentially miss out on a great prospect. Number 12 on the list, 4-star running back Aiden Gibson out of Woodruff High School in Woodruff, South Carolina. Gibson, guy that's expected to be on campus here later this month. I believe he's one of the guys that's expected to visit on March 28th during one of Carolina's spring practices. He's someone that the Tar Heel staff should be absolutely pushing for at this point. I have him as the top running back on my board. I think there, are a couple of other guys that, some Carolina fans may like, but I think this is the most complete, potentially, of the backs when you look at just how physical he is. Maybe not the most complete, because I don't know if he's as good of a receiver as a guy like Jeremiah Dent. So maybe I'll go with Den as maybe a little bit more complete of a back. But one of the things that I really like about Gibson that I think puts him over the top is he is a guy that is incredibly physical. There's not a lot of guys that Carolina has in this class that are physical. And when I say incredibly physical, that might be overplaying it a little bit. He's not going to be Damon June. He's not going to be some of the guys that Carolina has had in recent memory. But I love the way that he runs with a physical edge. And I do think that he has great contact balance. That's one thing that really stands out, is that when guys grab onto him, it's almost impossible to bring this guy down. He will throw tacklers off of him and keep going. That's something that you really like to see from guys, especially at the high school level. Great contact balance. If you want to go back and look at Tar Heel players that have had that, Javonte Williams definitely sticks out, and Amarian Hampton is the one you always go back to that really thrived in that area. So think of that type of running back for Carolina in terms of the style that they run. Maybe not on the same level, but in terms of the style in which he runs. Definitely a guy that combines that with some nice straight line speed and the ability to make defenders miss with how quickly he can change direction, which makes him one of the more difficult backs to get on the ground in this class. That's what you love to see, man. Guys that are just difficult to get on the ground once they have the football in their hands at the running back position. I think you've got that in Aiden Gibson. Also, he's a guy that can make plays in the receiving game, whether it's out of the backfield or if he lines up in one of the wide receiver slots. Didn't think he was as polished in terms of some of the routes that he ran as Jeremiah Dent, but certainly a guy that is more than serviceable in that area. I love everything about Aiden Gibson. I think he is the perfect fit for Carolina in a class where they may only take one running back. If you are only taking one running back, I think this should be the guy. Now, in terms of where Carolina's at in his recruitment, the fact that they are getting him on campus for that visit here in the spring is big. Now the thing will be, can you convince him to put you down as an official visit? Because right now, Carolina is not one of the schools that is on that official visit list. He does have 4 official visits that are scheduled: Rutgers, South Carolina, Penn State, and Virginia Tech. And so hopefully Carolina can get into that group and really make themselves a serious competitor in this race. Because, look, South Carolina's had him on campus 6 times so far. Rutgers has had him 4, Penn State twice. So he has become very familiar with a lot of these other schools. Hopefully Carolina is the next one that he will become familiar with. They need to push really hard in a race for a 4-star prospect that is growing by the day. Let's go to number 11 on the list. I have 4-star athlete A.J. Randall. Randall is another in-state prospect that I think Carolina and this staff really should be pushing hard for because of just how versatile he is on the defensive side of the football. There's a reason that he's listed as an athlete. There's a reason that he's a 4-star. It's because he's a guy that really could slot in as either a linebacker or box safety, and someone that I think really thrives playing closer to the line of scrimmage. Very strong tackler, which means that he can thrive in either role. I think he's a guy that is going to be very, very involved in the run game, no matter where he ultimately ends up playing. Does a good job of shedding blocks, which makes him, which allows him to make plays near the line of scrimmage, or someone that can drop guys in the backfield pretty consistently. And he has a high motor, which allows him to run plays down in the open field. The thing about him is I think you're going to have to learn a little bit more about him in terms of coverage. You don't see really any of that on his film, but I really like just how aggressive he is as a tackler. I think he does a really good job of wrapping up, throwing guys down to the ground. Definitely a guy that loves playing downhill and making plays at the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage for his team, depending on where he ultimately ends up playing. If he's playing that linebacker spot, usually going to be a guy that can get him at or behind the line of scrimmage. If he's playing that safety spot, typically going to be more of a guy that is making those plays near the line of scrimmage and helping limit those gains to short gains. So, certainly someone that I think is a run game specialist for Carolina if they end up going out and getting him. I think ultimately nailing down the position for him is going to be the most important thing, but there is a ton to like about what he ultimately brings to the table. In terms of where Carolina stands in his recruitment early on, this is one where, I think Carolina, they are off to a solid enough start with him. He's a guy that right now, has his recruitment going national. And so Florida is the team that right now many people believe is in a good spot with him. Miami also on the table for him, along with schools like NC State, Georgia Tech, Ohio State, Alabama. So this is one of the more national guys that Carolina is in on. If you're going to make a serious run at him, now is the time, because he already has an official visit scheduled to Florida. I think this is the perfect time to pounce if you are Carolina. And so, hopefully, you'd like to get him in for a visit here in the spring as well, and then maybe get him back for a visit there in the summer because he hasn't been to Carolina as much as you would ultimately think that he would have been to Carolina. So I find it important for Carolina to get on that spring visit schedule, maybe jump in on that official visit schedule as well here sooner rather than later. Even if it doesn't happen that soon, if you can get on that group, then you've certainly got a chance. Well, one guy that Carolina is already in on for an official visit is number 10 on the list. That would be Jeremiah Williams out of Tustin High School in Tustin, California. He is one of those guys that is just an enigma at the defensive line spot. And I'm going to tell you, we haven't had a single defensive lineman here so far, interior defensive lineman, that is, because we did have Jason Crenshaw over there at edge rusher. You're going to hear a lot of names here as we go throughout that are going to be on the defensive line, whether it is a defensive interior defensive lineman or a guy on the edge as we come down the stretch here. But Jeremiah Williams, one of the best releases off the line of scrimmage, and when you combine it with his speed and quickness, he is certainly someone that is difficult to stay in front of, especially in pass rush situations. That's really where he shines. And so we talk about the guys that do a really good job of clogging up the run game. There are a few guys that Carolina has been in on. That there's some guys in the state of North Carolina that really shine in that area. And there'll be another guy that we'll see later on this list that will be a run stopper. But this is one of those guys that can really get after the quarterback and put pressure on him from that defensive line spot. And you're looking for interior defensive linemen that can consistently do that. It's been a while since Carolina has had someone like that. Jahvaree Ritzie, I know he had success here, last year. Not last year, but the year before that for Carolina. Wasn't consistent enough. And so you're looking for that consistent threat that's able to do that week in and week out. I think Jeremiah Williams could be that guy. The athleticism that he brings to the table allows him to chase down plays from behind, especially when you combine it with what looks like a pretty high motor for him, judging off of his film. Also brings a physical edge to the table that is needed and can simply overpower guys at certain times with his quickness and burst off of the snap when you combine it with some of the physicality that he brings to the table as well. Look, this is not going to be an easy commitment for Carolina to land because they are going out to the West Coast to try to land it. But this is one of those guys that needs to be a major priority for Carolina, because if you can get someone that can rush the passer from the interior of that defensive line the way that he's able to do it, then you're going to have a lot of success if you're Carolina. He's one of the few guys in this class that I think can do it. Now, as expected, there are some of the normal teams that you would expect to be in on him that are in on him at this point. That would be UCLA, Arizona State, USC, Tennessee is another school here from the East Coast that's in on him, and also one not to sleep on is Miami as well, who is a recent offer for him that has just come in on the table for him here in recent weeks. And so I think he's certainly a guy that Carolina should be really pushing for. They do end up having, him on campus. Officially, it'll be May 29th. That weekend, he's also going to visit UCLA, Arizona State, and BYU officially during the month of June. And he is looking into scheduling trips to Arizona, Michigan, and Miami as well. And so that's what I said. Miami's going to be one of those schools that, he is going to be seriously looking at. And so Carolina really has to make sure that they nail that official visit when they have him on campus. Also, another guy that if you could find a way to get him on campus here sometime in the spring, really be able to talk to him and then ultimately get him back to Chapel Hill for that official visit, then you're going to be feeling pretty good about your chances. But certainly someone that I have very high on my priority list. He moved to number 9 on the list. That would be 4-star safety Davian Jones out of Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. One of the top defensive backs in this class and one of the top in-state prospects for Carolina. This guy definitely has to be pretty high on the priority list. Safety is one of those spots that's a little weird. Carolina has recruited there well the last few years. I think ultimately it's another spot that they're probably going to be looking to add guys through the transfer portal next year with some of the graduations that will ultimately be coming. And so I don't know how big of a need this necessarily is, and that's why I have him a little bit lower on here, but he is a fantastic player. I mean, one of my favorite players to watch this past year in the Charlotte area when I got eyes on him a couple of times when he was playing for West Charlotte. Now, of course, transferring to Huff, where they are just building a powerhouse, as I told you earlier. Look, he's the type of rangy safety that the Tar Heels have been searching for on the back end of their defense for a while now. The speed that he has, I think, is certainly something that allows him to close on the football, make plays on the football. And he is certainly someone that really, I think, has what Carolina is hoping for out of that free safety or that field safety position, whatever you refer to it as these days. That speed also shows up in the form of some big hits that he lays over the middle of the field or in the run game, something that he was that was a staple of Belichick's defenses when he was at the NFL level. Think of a guy like Rodney Harrison and the way that he used to play. That's what Carolina is ultimately looking for at their safety spot on defense. He's a guy that brings good coverage skills to the table, especially for a safety, and he plays the ball incredibly well, resulting in a healthy amount of pass breakups. I think this is one of those guys that Carolina should be all over, especially because he's another guy that when you talk about special teams value, there is a ton that he brings to the table. He is a tremendous returner, had one in the season opener against Grimsley High School that gets ultimately taken away from him that because of some flag, I don't even remember what it was, but showed that burst. There is a ton of speed to his game. It shows up in every aspect. Love the motor that he brings to the table as well. This is a guy that really can do it all. And so I think Carolina should be very, very high on him. I know right now, in the early portions of his recruitment, he is a guy that, doesn't necessarily have Carolina in the thick of things, but Carolina, is trying everything they can to get him back on campus here during the spring. And I think that's going to be very important. If they can get him back to Carolina, I think that's something that's going to allow them to succeed. He's got a pretty good relationship, at least according to some of the recent write-ups from Don Callahan of Inside Carolina, got a good relationship with Armand Hawkins. And so hopefully this is a guy that Carolina can get back into the thick of things with and potentially make a push. We saw Carolina do it late in the last recruiting class. Success on the field would certainly help for Carolina, but this is one that could come to an end sooner than that, sooner than Carolina is able to prove themselves on the field. So they really need to get working here over the next couple of months, get him on campus here in the spring and also find a way to get him on campus for an official visit, and you'll have a shot, because right now Clemson, South Carolina doing a really good job with them, NC State, another school that's off to a pretty solid start. And I mean, when you talk about his offer list, you're talking about schools like Miami, who is another school to keep an eye on, Florida State, Ohio State, Auburn, all the big time schools, Texas A&M's in there, LSU, all of those schools are going to be in on him big time. So Carolina's really got to make sure that they are making him a priority and doing so as soon as possible. You move on to number 8. We get to the quarterback that's on this list. And as I said, I promised you guys only one quarterback on this list, because again, it is a position that is not a huge position of need for Carolina, especially with Travis Burgess already in the system. For Carolina, you're going to have Miles O'Neill, who will be around for a while as well. And so this is the one and only quarterback that I put on the list. But man, he is a really, really talented one. And 4-star quarterback Peter Bork out of Tabor Academy in Hingham, Massachusetts. He is one of the biggest arms in the class. I think he's really going to be able to show that when he gets to the Elite 11 regionals. He'll be a guy that no doubt will be in the Elite 11 finals, barring something just completely unforeseen happening when he's at the Elite 11 regionals. He is a guy that does a great job of winning from the pocket and thrives at carving teams up in the short and intermediate passing games. But he is a guy that can get it done in the deep passing game as well. Actually, more of a guy that, thrives in the deep passing game more than the short passing game. Got that mixed up there. I wrote down short, unfortunately, twice on my breakdown that I have here of him. Look, he is a guy that I think, is really going to thrive in the deep portion of the field. I think he's got plenty of arm strength, more arm strength than just about anybody in this class. I think he's certainly a guy that has great deep ball accuracy as well. And those are the things you're looking for, is not only do you want someone that can air it out. We saw that, for example, a guy like Anthony Richardson, he can air the ball out as far as just about anybody in the sport of football. Joe Milton, another guy that really fits into that category. Problem is, are they able to do it accurately? Are they able to hit guys in stride? You saw that consistently on Bork's film, and I think he's a guy that really is going to push to be one of the top quarterbacks in this class, especially once he gets into that Elite 11 type of competition. Really strong and clean footwork in the pocket, and his mobility outside of the pocket makes him one of the more complete quarterbacks in the class. When I watched him run, and this might be difficult to think because of the success that he's had, not only at the college level with Carolina, but also at the NFL level with the New England Patriots. He reminds me of Drake May. He did some of the ways that he runs the football, some of the deep ball, in terms of the arm strength and the deep ball accuracy, does kind of remind me a little bit of Drake. And so I think that's something that you could, if you're, Bill Belichick and this staff, sell to him, is that, we had a guy here at Carolina that had a ton of success in Drake May. Maybe you could be the next guy that can do that. Now, the one thing I will say about his recruitment is they just got this that came in, I think it was yesterday, where he received a crystal ball prediction to land at Penn State. And so he is certainly a guy that's pretty far into his recruitment, which isn't shocking. Quarterbacks are usually the guys that are way ahead of the curve, and it wouldn't shock me if he's a guy that's close to committing here soon. Of course, he was a guy that was formerly committed to Michigan, and so for Penn State to jump in there, I think, and jump into the driver's seat, I think that is huge. But look, one of the teams that he brought up when he decommitted that he was going to at least consider was Carolina. This one's going to be tough. There's no doubt about that. I'm not going to lie to you. Carolina, in order to get this one, they are going to have to push incredibly, incredibly hard. But I would love for them to make him the priority, because I think this is the type of guy that you want to bring in. If you're going to bring in another quarterback, And I think, again, it's very important to always bring in one in this class. But if you're wanting to bring in one, you want it to be a competitive one. You want it to be someone that can help you get back to where you were under Drake Maye, potentially even take you further than where you were under him. This would be the type of guy that would be able to do that. I think he should be priority number one at that quarterback spot, but we'll ultimately see what ends up happening for Carolina, but I have him number 8 on my list. You go to number 7, that would be Jalathan Mayfield out of Lincolnton High School in Lincolnton, North Carolina. Another guy that Carolina's not in the greatest spot for, but he's just too damn talented to not have on this list. An aggressive downhill linebacker that lives in opposing backfields, something that Carolina needs in the middle of their defense. Does a great job of fighting through blocks with physicality and has the speed necessary to track down ball carriers in space, making him a menace for opposing offenses to stop. He has a great nose for the football, which results in a lot of fumbles, something that should be more than welcomed by this Tar Heel defense. That was something they didn't really do a whole lot of this past year, but really this is a guy that with his speed, he can play downhill, he can play sideline to sideline. He really covers both bases. Now, the thing that you would love to see a little bit more from him is his coverage skills, but when you're a guy that really sticks out in the run game the way that he does, it makes sense that you want to showcase that ability more than anything. I still think he is an absolute stud at the linebacker position. I think this is one that Carolina should be heavily in on. And again, this is one where Carolina's sort of fallen behind here. They are not in a great spot for him at this time. But you're hoping that, again, we saw Carolina with some of these guys down the stretch of the 2026 class, that it took them a while to really jump in on and took them a while to become serious contenders with. You hope that maybe they can do that, a little more focus on the in-state prospects this year. And so I would love to see Carolina really make a strong push for them. Right now, some of the schools that really are doing the best job with him. South Carolina is a school that's off to a really strong start. NC State, another one that's really had their success early on in this recruitment. Georgia, Miami, those are schools that are now starting to become even more and more involved with him, and even a school like Oregon starting to become a real factor for him. He's a guy that, he's been to Carolina a couple of times, and I think one of the things they would love to do is get him on that visit schedule, that official visit schedule, as soon as possible. NC State, a team that actually, I didn't even realize this, just recently got left off of his top 5 list. So this is a guy that's really moving quickly. If Carolina is going to do something, they have to jump on it as soon as possible. But he does have official visits scheduled to Indiana, Miami, Oregon, Georgia, and Kentucky. So, yeah, if Carolina is going to make a move here, they've got to do it as soon as possible. I think he is more than worth it from a Carolina perspective. And so hopefully that is what Carolina views this as well, because he is the best linebacker that Carolina could get in this class. You go to number 6 on the list, that would be 4-star defensive lineman John Archer out of 71st High School in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Now, the one thing that's weird about him, I've seen 24/7 Sports list him as an offensive lineman. He does not take any snaps from what I can see on the offensive line. At least none of them are in his highlight tape. He is a guy that is exclusively on the defensive line, and I love him as a defensive lineman. So I'm hoping that he stays on that side of the ball. This is one of those guys that is an in-state defensive lineman. He's my top interior defensive lineman that I have on the board. He is the exact type of player that the Tar Heels are looking for at the nose guard position, with his ability to be a 2-gap run stopper. Has a nice release off the line of scrimmage that gives him the early advantage, and then he turns to the physicality to win at the point of attack. Love it. You're looking for guys that are going to be more physical than the group that you saw this past year. I didn't think the interior of the defensive line was really that bad. I thought they showed some real potential. Of course, Carolina going to have to overhaul that group this year a little bit in terms of two of the guys in the rotation after it was a 4-man rotation last year. 2 of those guys have left, and so Carolina has to replace them. But this is still a position that Carolina is going to be pushing hard for in this next recruiting class. And I think John Archer really fits exactly what they're hoping to have at that position, what they're hoping to get from guys that they brought in this past recruiting class, like Vodney Cleveland, like Valami Moala, some of those guys. That's ultimately what you're going to be looking for from those guys. And so I think John Archer fits that to a T. He doesn't use technical pass rush moves often to get off of blocks, but he has shown that he has the ability to when needed and has proven to be a real solid pass rusher for someone whose focus is on stopping the run. I think, that's one of the things that you want to see is just a guy that brings effort there. When you're a guy that's traditionally a run stopper, you don't necessarily need to be a guy that succeeds in pass rush, but it's there. There's a little bit of athleticism to him as well, especially for a guy of his size at 6'5", 320 pounds, So he is definitely someone that I think Carolina should be pushing hard for. He was a guy that visited campus back last summer. And so Carolina, the thing that they've got to do is make sure that they are on his official visit schedule. Now, when it comes to where his recruitment is at right now, Carolina, South Carolina, the teams that are given the early advantage according to Rivals, it feels like they are still in the early portion of this class. But I will tell you that there are some new teams that have jumped in here recently that are going to make things very interesting, and Carolina needs to make sure that they are doing everything they can to try to land them. That would be Ohio State and Texas as teams that have jumped in on him recently. Both of those schools looking at him as a potential priority. And so if that is the case, then Carolina is going to be in for a battle. So hopefully they are ready for it, because this would be the perfect fit for Carolina on the interior of the defensive line. I just hope that they are focused the way that they need to be on getting him, to Carolina and making him a part of this class. Then you go to the top 5. Number 5, 3-star interior offensive lineman Chavez Dixon out of Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. And I know a lot of people are going to say, man, why do you got a 3-star on this list here? Man, you turn on the film of this kid, and I'm telling you, you would ask yourself, how in the world is this a guy that is a 3-star prospect? Carolina, luckily, off to a really good start with him, which I'll tell you about here in a minute. But he is another player that really displays some promising athleticism for a guy of his size. They use him as a pull blocker. They use him as a screen blocker, and he's very, very successful. I mean, if you can get out on those screen passes and really knock some guys' heads off, that's when you know you're going to be successful. And especially for an interior offensive lineman, or at least a guy that projects to be an interior offensive lineman, he's got some size on him. And so that's really promising that he is able to get out in space and make plays. Love the fact that you can use him as a pull blocker. There's certain guys that you look at here sometimes when you're watching film, and they don't use him ever as a pull blocker. This guy, you constantly saw them using him as a pull blocker because of his athleticism. So I really like that. Really succeeds in driving guys off the line of scrimmage in the run game. And a lot of what he does can be attributed to the violence that he plays with. He's not a guy that's going to pile up the pancake blocks nearly as much as some of the other guys in this class. But I do think that he is a guy that just does a good job of really knocking guys back off the line of scrimmage. And that's something that you really love to see if you're a Tar Heel fan, because you just don't have enough guys that can do that. I mean, you go back to this past year for Carolina, in the run game, you couldn't get guys that could stay in front of other guys. This is a dude that's going to not only stay in front of them, but is going to drive them out of the gap and allow your running backs to be able to succeed. That violence shows up in pass protection, an area that he really shines in, especially for an interior offensive lineman. So, I mean, when you have a guy that really shines, and he's a guy, if I remember his film correctly, I went through so many guys that, some of the film starts to blend together. If I remember correctly, he was a guy that played on the interior of the offensive line in high school. For him to be shining as a pass protector in that area, I think that is really, really promising. And so Carolina, one of the teams that's in on him early, I think they need to keep the foot on the gas here. And if they do, they've got a real chance to be able to land him. A guy that's coming from the state of Georgia, always a threat, the Georgia Bulldogs. They're always going to be lurking. I know Florida State is in on this recruitment as well, Ole Miss, Virginia Tech. But I really do think that for Carolina getting his official visit on the schedule, he does have ones to Virginia Tech and Florida State as well. But I do think that getting him on the official visit schedule already is a huge, huge step in the right direction for Carolina. And hopefully that is something that they will be able to build on over the next handful of months as they get towards that official visit. All right, we go inside of the top 5 to number 4. 4-star offensive tackle Kennedy Jackson out of Lithonia High School in McDonough, Georgia. A guy that I think when you look at the offensive tackle, I think he's the best in this class for Carolina that they have offered and that they have a legitimate shot to be able to land. He is one of the stronger pass protectors in this class, and his footwork and lateral movement are both very promising. He showcases a strong upper body that allows him to be able to succeed in run blocking scenarios, and he does a good job of climbing to the second level in the run game to get a hat on a linebacker or a safety, which allows big plays to develop. Those things right there, everything that you need to know, that's when you are loving a prospect. When you've got a guy that really the first thing that jumps off the page to you is pass protection. That means that you've got yourself a legitimate offensive lineman. You've got yourself a legitimate offensive tackle, because a lot of the tackles that I watch, a lot of the guys' films that I put on, they are focused heavily on the run game. Now, the one thing that I will say, and what is fair, is that there are a lot of high school offenses that are very run-based. But when you've got a guy that can really succeed in pass protection, that's when you've got someone that you should feel pretty good about. He's got to combine that with the success in the run game. And I think you see that when you turn on the film of Jackson. Again, not a guy that's going to pile up a huge amount of pancake blocks, but really just does a great job of moving guys out of the way, moving them out of the hole. And so I think he's definitely going to be someone that'll succeed at the next level. I think when you combine those two abilities together, and then when you talk about the athleticism that he brings to the table, really thrives in pull block situations and in screen situations, those are things that you just absolutely love about an offensive lineman. Again, I think every box that you need to check for Kennedy Jackson is there. And so I love him. I've got him at number 4 on my list in terms of where his recruitment stands. Again, it's still a little bit early on in his recruitment. There are still some other schools that I think are going to jump in here before it's all said and done. But, Carolina, one of those teams that already has an official visit scheduled with him. LSU, Florida, Georgia, and Auburn also with official visits scheduled at this point. Actually, Georgia Tech in there as well. But, for Carolina to be one of those schools that's in there, do I think that they are the top contender for them right now? Probably not. Those are probably going to be the in-state schools. But this would be one that if I'm Carolina, I would tell him right out, you're our top priority. You are the number 1 guy on our board. And that again, that's what I've got. I don't know what they officially have. I don't know who they like better than him, but to me, that should be the number 1 guy on the board for Carolina because of everything that he brings to the table as a pass protector, combined with what he does in the run blocking and what he brings athletically. So definitely someone that Carolina should be pushing very hard for over the next handful of weeks. You move inside the top 3. It's 2 edge rushers and a corner, and we'll start with an edge rusher. 4-star edge rusher Andrew Rogers out of Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. This is a name that probably sounds familiar to a lot of people because he was a guy that was originally a 27 class member, moved to the 26 class, and then eventually moved back to the 27 class. At one time when he was in the 26 class, was committed to Virginia Tech. He is no longer committed to Virginia Tech, and so he is a guy that a lot of teams are going after. Not going to lie, Carolina's not in one of the top spots for him. Don't even really get mentioned with him. But I absolutely love everything about him. And being an in-state guy, this is someone that Carolina should be looking to prioritize as soon as they possibly can. He utilizes his long arms as well, or utilizes his long arms well to keep tackles' hands off of him, and does a great job of combining physicality with speed to get into the opponent's backfield consistently. He does a really good job of setting an edge in the run game, something that would pair nicely with some of the pure pass rushers that Carolina is going to be going after in this class. One of them we'll talk about here coming up in just a moment. This is one of those guys that I think when you look at everything that he's able to do, he is a guy that does a really good job of combining the speed to the power. I think that is certainly something that you're looking for out of these edge rushers, is not only a guy that can succeed because he's just beating you with speed off the edge, but has a little bit of physicality to his game as well. I think you see that. You see that he's able to do that. And as I said, he uses his length well. He's a guy that, it really measures in at, a really good height and weight, and certainly is someone that, because he was getting ready to be a part of that 26 class, I think is more developed and more ready than some of these other guys. I mean, 6'6", 240. I know some people may say, hey, let's put a little bit more weight on him. But 6'6", you can't teach that type of length. That's certainly something that Carolina is looking for. And so I'm actually shocked that they're not more involved in this recruitment. Tennessee right now is the school that's really high on him. That's the school that I think most people expect that he will actually end up landing with. But this is a guy that at one time during the early part of his recruitment, when he was still a member of the 27 class at a time last year, Carolina was in on heavily, and it looked like they were going to have a real legitimate shot to be able to land. I would love to see them get back into the running for him at this point. I think that would really make things interesting for Carolina and give them a legitimate edge rusher, because, again, this is a spot that Carolina is going to be looking for in this class pretty heavily, with Milcard Abujade going to be gone, with Donovan Hoylett also going to be gone for them. They are going to be looking for guys probably in the transfer portal that can help them immediately, unless some of these other guys blossom. And that is something that could certainly happen. So if it does happen, you want to be able to recruit this position. And this is another position where you want to be able to bring in multiple guys in each class. And so I think Andrew Rogers should be right at the top of that priority list for Carolina. He's not the number one edge rusher that I have on my board, but he certainly is someone that Carolina needs to value. I think is the guy that, I would have as my second prospect in the state of North Carolina that the Tar Heels should be focusing on. All right, we move on to number 2 on the list. That would be 4-star edge rusher Mekhi Brown out of Greenwich Country Day School in Greenwich, Connecticut. Brown, a guy who was just on campus, a couple of weekends ago, is one of the guys that the Tar Heels look at as one of their top edge rushers. This is one that they have as a extremely high priority, and for good reason. He brings the most potential to the table, and with his ability to generate pressure on the quarterback, pretty simply, I think he's the guy that really stands out from this group of edge rushers. I think with how easy he makes it look at certain times, that's what really makes you like him. Really nice release off the line of scrimmage that puts him in an advantageous spot off of the snap. Uses a good mix of speed and technicality to work past blockers and put pressure on the quarterback. He's the type of guy that you want because he has a high motor and would fit perfectly with what this staff wants from the players on that side of the ball. More of a straight line edge rusher, more of a guy that's really going to be looking to get after the quarterback more than anything. And so that's why I said a guy like Andrew Rogers would really pair perfectly with this guy. He's going to be there to do what Milcart Abujade did this past year. And you're going to have to teach him how to set an edge and be a little more consistent in a run game. But he's going to be a guy that, just like Milcart, maybe even more similar to what you saw from Tyler Thompson. And one of the reasons that you're concerned about losing Tyler Thompson is because he was developing into one of those guys that could just simply get after the passer when you needed him to. That's the feeling that you get from Mekhi Brown. I mean, look, this is a top 50 guy that Carolina is after in this recruiting class. He is incredibly well respected by both of the recruiting websites. And so, I mean, this one is national recruitment that Carolina is in the middle of. They are certainly one of those teams that I think has to be one of the early favorites for him. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is ranked 48th nationally according to Rivals. I think he's very similar spot to 24/7, and Carolina doing a really good job out of the gate. Now, Rutgers, definitely a team to watch for him. He's taken 4 visits to Rutgers so far in his high school career. He has 3 visits to Penn State, including one that just is scheduled to come up here over the spring. And so Carolina, I mean, look, for them to get him on campus, I thought that was huge. That was a great job by this staff. This is the second time this offseason that they've had him on campus, going back to a visit in January. So they're doing a really good job with him. They're going to need to continue to push hard because there are not only the teams that have been in on him for a while, but now you're starting to get new offers that are rolling in. USC, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. So for Carolina, it's going to be very, very important that they stay on him, that they're making him feel like he is the priority in the class. Like I said, to me, he is the priority at the edge rusher spot. He's the number one guy that I have on my board, the number one out-of-state recruit that I think Carolina should be going after as well. So I love everything about him. I see why the staff made him someone that was important to get on campus here a couple of times during this offseason. Now you've got to continue to do the dirty work. You've got to continue to find a way to scratch and claw through some of these other teams that have had more success on the field, that might have a little bit more money than you do coming to the table, and find a way to get this commitment out of Mekhi Brown when it's all said and done. Final guy that I have on the list for Carolina, number 1 on my list, that would be 5-star cornerback Joshua Dobson out of Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. As I said, he is the top guy on my list, which means he's the top target in the state of North Carolina that I think this staff should be going after. He's a corner that thrives in man coverage in large part because of the speed that he possesses, which allows him to break hard on the football and recover if he does get beat. In his sophomore film, which was the film that I really took a lot more away from with him and I think shows the type of potential that he has, he had plenty of success in zone coverage situations because of how well he reads the eyes of the quarterback, and he did an outstanding job of playing the football in the air. His fluid hips and strong change of direction helps him get in and out of breaks quickly, to stay with receivers, and if the ball is caught, he does a great job of getting the ball carrier on the ground thanks to his tackling ability. That's not something that we talk a whole lot about with corners, is guys that really do a good job of tackling. But you talk about zone-heavy schemes. Carolina was a team that last year had some moments where they went zone-heavy. In order to thrive in those situations, and even in some of the man coverage situations that you're going to be in, you are going to get beat from time to time. You got to be a good tackler to limit some of these plays and prevent them from becoming explosive plays. We saw that way too many times for Carolina this past year. I think that's one of the areas where Joshua Dobson really thrives. And I mean, when you talk about the hips, this is a guy that gets in and out of breaks so easily. I love how quickly he can flip the hips and turn and run with guys. I think that really allows him to stay with just about anybody. And, again, there's no receiver that really is able to shake him off because of the change direction ability that he has. The other thing that you'll love to see from him is just how involved he is in the run as an outside corner. You go to his junior film, that's what really sticks out, is he is incredibly involved in the run game. I think now he's going to be at a school that's going to be able to prioritize him. Catawba Ridge, where he was this past year, not that they weren't able to prioritize him and really put him on a stage to be successful. They just weren't a great team. And so now he's going to be on one of the best teams in the Charlotte area. He's going to have eyes on him every single night. And he's going to be a guy that's going to probably get some teams that are going to try to go after him to really test what type of player he is. This is going to be a chance for him to put up a really strong season. So I love everything that we saw from him when you combine his junior and sophomore film. And I think this is the most complete player that Carolina can be going after in this class. Now to the bad news. When it comes to where Carolina is at with him, they're not one of those teams that right now is firmly in the running for him. But he's a guy that hasn't ruled out coming to Carolina at some point here during the spring, potentially taking an official visit to Carolina. And a lot of that is because of his relationship with Armand Hawkins. Armand Hawkins is apparently pushing incredibly hard for him to make a visit to campus and for Carolina to become a legitimate contender in his recruitment. So they're going to have to get him on campus here sometime soon. He has been to campus already once. That was last offseason during the summer. And so hopefully Carolina can get him back here in the next couple of weeks and potentially get an official visit scheduled with him, because it feels like he's going to be getting to that point after he goes through these spring visits. LSU is the school in the best standing with him right now, but South Carolina, they've hosted him 9 times officially during his recruitment. So he is incredibly, incredibly popular with the South Carolina staff. Clemson also very high on him as well. Texas A&M, Tennessee. I mean, he's got all of the offers that you could possibly want, and it makes sense because he is a 5-star. I mean, he's the number 8 player in the class. I mean, this would be just an unbelievable get for Carolina, and I think he certainly lives up to the billing from what I've seen from him on tape. So he's number 1 on my list. I'll run through my guys here again. We'll go top to bottom this time. Number 1, as I just mentioned, Joshua Dobson, the 5-star cornerback from Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. Number 2, 4-star edge rusher Mekhi Brown from Greenwich Country Day in Greenwich, Connecticut. Easy for me to say. 4-star edge rusher Andrew Rogers from Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina is number 3 on my list. Number 4, 4-star offensive tackle Kennedy Jackson from Lithonia High School in McDonough, Georgia. Number 5, 3-star interior offensive lineman Chavez Dixon from Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. Another guy that I have on the list at number 6, 4-star defensive lineman John Archer out of 71st High School in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Number 7, 4-star linebacker Jalathan Mayfield from Lincolnton High School in Lincolnton, North Carolina. Peter Bork, the 4-star quarterback from Tabor Academy in Hingham, Massachusetts. He is number 8 on the list. You've got 4-star safety Davian Jones from Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina at number 9. Number 10 is 4-star defensive lineman Jeremiah Williams out of Tustin High School in Tustin, California. Number 11, 4-star athlete AJ Randall from Garner High School in Garner, North Carolina. 4-star running back Aiden Gibson out of Woodruff High School in Woodruff, South Carolina is number 12 on the list. Number 13 is 3-star linebacker Michael Griffin out of Huff High School in Cornelius, North Carolina. Number 14, 4-star cornerback Ramel Kuhn out of Brentwood Academy in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You also have at number 15, 3-star wide receiver Malik Miller out of Dutch Fork High School in Columbia, South Carolina. 4-star interior offensive lineman Jackson Roper out of Cherry Creek High School in Inglewood, Colorado, number 16. Number 17, unranked tight end Carter Blackwell out of Lee County High School in Leesburg, Georgia. Number 18, 3-star safety Lance Henderson from Southern High School in Durham, North Carolina. Number 19, Jason Crenshaw Jr. out of Prattville High School in Prattville, Alabama. He is an unranked linebacker. And then you've got at number 20 on the list, rounding out the 20 most wanted prospects in the 2027 class. From my perspective, that would be 3-star running back Jeremiah Dent from Marion High School in Marion, Arkansas. All right, guys, so that is your look at the 2027 class, the most wanted for Carolina from my perspective. Make sure you go over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, and check out our breakdowns of those guys. We have a little bit more in-depth for you guys over there, so we'd greatly appreciate it if you guys would check that out. Now time for the news that you guys have all been waiting for. If you're hanging on with us here, it is the start date for spring practice and Carolina's pro day. So the start day for spring practice for the Tar Heels is going to be next Tuesday, March 24th. That's going to be the first day that the guys are taking the field. They will be they will be in shorts and t-shirts for that day. Not sure exactly when they're officially going to be able to put on the pads, but that will be the first day that Carolina is out there for some spring football. First time we'll get a look at this crew for this upcoming season, and hopefully we'll get some insight into what exactly is going on. We'll be, of course, bringing on reporters all throughout the spring that are going to be covering it a little bit more in depth than we are. And so hopefully you guys will be checking that out here on this same feed that you are watching this podcast tonight. Also, Carolina Pro Day, that is going to be March 23rd. That is next Monday. We'll see all the guys that are attempting to make it to the NFL level. Hopefully that'll be a pretty decent group for Carolina that'll be out there. So make sure you keep an eye on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, for all of that information as it comes out. And of course, more information on the recruiting side of things. We'll have any other news that comes out on the recruiting front for you guys over there on HeelToughBlog.com. Right now, though, the big thing that's going on over on the website is the NCAA tournament, guys. The Tar Heels in the NCAA tournament as a 6th seed, so make sure that you guys are keeping up with all of our articles on the website. Josh put up an article last night after Carolina was selected into the field as a 6th seed in the South region, and so make sure that you guys keep an eye on the website for game previews, game recaps of Carolina's run through the NCAA tournament. Hopefully it is a long one for Carolina. That's at least what we are hoping for on our side. And we'll, of course, be taking you through it on the podcast side of things as well. The Four Corners podcast, same spot that you are watching this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast, whether it's on YouTube, on Facebook, or if you're on Twitter, you can watch the Four Corners podcast as well. You can also get it wherever you listen to your podcast, and we preview and recap every single game for you guys. We are the only podcast that does that, at least the only fan podcast that does that. Not sure if some of the other sites do end up doing that for you guys, but we're there for you every single time Carolina plays. And so make sure that you guys are watching those editions of the podcast, letting us know what you think about the important topics around Tar Heel basketball, including the future of head coach Hubert Davis. So that wraps up this edition of the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.